How's it going, everybody? And welcome to another episode of Raw or Rules as Written. I am one of your co-hosts, Matt Robertson, also known as Grape Ape.
And hey, folks, Stefan Stroud or D and Bad Wrong Fun.
Stefan, the first thing we got to know: are you back in your house yet?
I am
Yes.
painting and organizing and many things to be done, but I'm back there. I'm back. I get to
And now,
not eat the continental breakfast every day anymore. Which
now
at
you
first it's nice, but
after the 13th time, you're like, oh, this
yes.
again. Now you got to like resort all your collection, right? You know, you
Uh,
gotta.
though the bookcases got to stay in place. I just have to resort all the rooms we live in.
Everything else, the
Yeah.
important stuff is safe.
Yes.
Well, we got an excellent guest joining us on the show today. A guest from last week when we had our DungeonCon recap episode, Tyler Stroud. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Hey everybody, glad to be here.
And Tyler, if this is the first time, if they missed Raw last week, or if this is the first time they're seeing you, tell us a little bit about yourself and your relation to Goodman Games and Xcrawl Classics and Xcrawl Classics.
Yeah, really just started off a huge fan several years ago. The art drew me in, like it does most people. And then when Goodman announced Xcrawl, I just jumped straight into it. I'm a public address announcer, a stadium announcer by trade, and so it really leans towards the DJ aspect of things. And then with my voiceover work, the voices and things just all kind of come out. And so my local Gong Farmers 513, they really get a show when we get together every couple weeks.
Now, that jersey you're wearing, you sent that into Brendan, and I think I got the email for it, and I emailed Brendan, and I was like, look at this, and we were like, what? Did you made that, right?
Yeah, I had it custom made. Yeah, absolutely. And
Show
I
off the
also
back a
custom.
little bit. Let's see what you got
Oh
going
yeah,
on there. Nice.
Amazing.
Action. Yep. Shout out to everybody in the Sin City here in Cincinnati.
Very nice. Very nice. All right. Well, Tyler, we got you on. We're about to dive into the rules. Now, in the blurb, it said the dwarf and the gnome, but Stefan, I think we're only going to have enough time for the dwarf. We're going to have to put the gnome off for another episode.
Nobody puts Nomi in the corner, Matt. You're gonna pay for this.
All right, all right. Well, Elena, if you'd bring up our first question for Tyler, let's get right into it. Let's get down to business. Tyler, with the current prejudices from the dwarven community, how will that affect a dwarf PC in Xcrawl? This one's kind of more opinion based here.
So with the history of dwarves in the Northern American Empire, they got the short end of the stick, definitely. And so I think as a dwarf PC, you would more than likely still get support from the Northern American Empire itself, the fans and whatnot. But I really feel that fellow dwarves, as it says, it's really going to be frowned upon. So trusting in your family or your friends, fellow dwarves, you're really not going to get that support. So I think that outside of crawls, it's going to really make a huge impact for players and give a lot of roleplay opportunity. And then, the potential of someone winning over the dwarf community and representing in a positive manner, I think also leans itself a lot to some great play opportunities.
Yeah, 100%. Lane, if you'd bring up handout 1A for us, on page 52 in the XCC RPG, it talks about you are the source of much derision and disrespect among your peers. More honor in hunting animals in a zoo is what they say about Xcrawl. Stefan, you're like an outcast, right?
Yeah, that's rough. Not that metaphor there about the honor really kind of brings it home.
Dwarves have a lot of honor, right?
Oh yeah. And I like the bit of background they have in here about Emperor George Augustus. Hey dwarves, come over, settle this place. You're gonna have your JK guys. We're just gonna roll over you like everyone else, just like you were trying to escape. But they're outnumbered. They can't fight against all the American Empire. and they just kind of have to take the deal, even though it's a pretty crummy deal.
Now,
And
Tyler, do you think
yeah.
the dwarven community likes Xcrawl as a whole? They just don't like dwarven Xcrawl players?
I would feel that they wouldn't. If I were if there was a dwarf in my game, or if I was playing one, I probably would play as if there wouldn't be. Just shunning the whole thing. Why? Yes, a dwarf being in it wouldn't bring honor, but even more so, why would you go to the zoo and, like they said in the book, and murder the animals? It's the same thing. I think they'd find a different route to go down for entertainment.
We got one of your players in the chat, Jeff Whitty, who does some art for some publications. Good to see you, Jeff. He said he played with you on Friday before
Yep.
Dungeon Con.
It was an absolute blast. Hey, Jeff, good seeing you.
All right. Well, then, if you could bring up handout 1B for us. It goes on to say that the New World might be the dwarven home of prophecy, the mythical land where, as the legends claim, all dwarves will come together and live as one people, indivisible and unconquerable. That's what they thought they were getting when they came over, the promise. Now, that lends itself to be a little bit of a prophecy here going on, right? I mean,
Mhm.
and so if there's a prophecy, there's got to be a point of fulfillment, a revolution. Stefan, what
Yeah, and I think you could have in a campaign, you could craft some really amazing stories of like a dwarven DJ. If you had a dwarven DJ, they would be so hated and reviled.
Mhm.
Um, they're making the zoo that the animals are hunted in. So there's some like really powerful stuff that you can do in a game. But yeah, maybe that dwarven player, they can, I think you could take it like I can imagine like, ooh, I'm gonna take the bit from like, Escape from New York, and shut down all the satellites that broadcast Xcrawl, and that's what the dwarven prophet, or the prophesied dwarf would do. He's gonna shut down Xcrawl, or well, hey, a few people might actually want to do that from a few different oppressed cultures in this world.
Now, Tyler, does that lend to having a dwarven X-Crawl anti-hero? Like, and let's say, totally hated at level 1, but as that fame kind of grows, the dwarven community almost embraces them like a leader and be like, hey, maybe, this guy's already integrated into the system.
Yeah, that's a great point. And if we kind of harken it back to like the basis and the themes of Xcrawl, you're talking heel and babyface, right? So the wrestling. So you go back to that, and yeah, everybody kind of hates the heels at first. I mean, great example if you're into wrestling, The Undertaker, right? He was supposed to be a giant heel, and he became one of the most renowned and loved and beloved characters of all time. Even though he was technically a heel most of the time. And I think that someone in the right hands could absolutely do that and unite the dwarven people and really bring them forward to fulfill the prophecy. I think that'd be amazing.
All right. And lady, if you bring up our last handout 1C, on page 53, it goes on to say the transplanted dwarves finally submitted to human rule, resentful of the emperor and disdainful of the empire as a whole. I mean, so kind of like Stefan, exactly like Stefan said, there's a lot of resentment there. There's probably a lot of hatred there. And it's just a sheer numbers game. Like the humans outnumber all the dwarves, and they can't get any help. All the other dwarves are an ocean away.
Yeah. And you could really go in hard with like how Xcrawl might want to use dwarves. Oh, we couldn't get dwarves to be bad guys in this room. No dwarves would be willing to work in Xcrawl. So we put some beards on some gnomes. You're gonna have dwarves in the community complaining about beard face. Um, you can go really hard with that if it's something that you and your players want to get into in your game, which not everyone will.
Yeah, that's a great point.
That is a great point. All right, Stefan, you want to hit Tyler with question number 2?
Absolutely, yeah. So get into the rules. Does the dwarf roll their D die for every new attack?
What do you say,
No,
Tyler?
absolutely not. Your deed die, you get one deed per action, or per round of actions, and then So no, I think it's the rules are pretty clear here that you get your deed die on it, and if you fumble it, you fumble it.
All right, and well, tell us a little bit about what the D die is first. What is this D die that we speak of?
Yeah, great question. So, just like with brawlers previously, and then in DCC, your warriors, your D die, you get a called shot. At level 1, you get a D3 to roll along with your D20, and on a 3 or higher, well, of course, a D3 you can't get higher, but on a 3, your deed goes off. So you get called shot, whether it be tripping, gouging out an eye, arm bar, that sort of thing. You get to call your shot. As you level up, that deed die continues to get higher, larger and larger and larger, so you can increase your chance of having those called shots like come off. Um, so it's a great mechanic, and it really helps them keep up with the damage of all the pew pew wizard type folk.
All right, Elena, if you bring up handout 2A for us, dwarf rolls their D die on each attack roll, and it applies to both their attack roll and their damage roll. So this is the attack modifier, right, Stefan?
Yes.
And applies to both attack. So whatever your result is to hit, and then if you do hit, same roll also applies to damage. And then Elena, if you bring up handout 2B, the dwarf always makes a new roll with this die per action dice. So, Tyler, I'm going to have to say, I think that it might be a new roll per attack. When the dwarf has multiple attacks at higher levels, the same D die applies to all attacks in the same combat round. Now, that's where we get into confusion, because is it the same D die, like the same D4, or the same deed result? It would say D die result. What do you think?
I think when I read through this, and when I would focus on the second sentence there. So the same deed die applies to all their attacks. But you're absolutely right. It does say per action die. So I think what then will additionally complicate things is when you're doing sword and board with a dwarf. Which one of those deed die is going to be the one that influences the sword and board?
That
When
is a
you do
good
your
question.
shield bash, are you're not re-rolling it at first level, so as you get into higher levels, I would feel that it'd be one for the whole thing, but it does leave it up to the interpretation here.
Now, Stefan, I included the little blurb underneath from the DCC
Mhm.
RPG. And so the dwarf in DCC always makes a new roll with the die in each combat round. So, Tyler, you're absolutely correct there. And maybe that's where some of the confusion is. Here, we might get kind of a little bit of a clarification on a rule that was a little bit ambiguous. Stefan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, to me, it reads like the dwarf with each action die, they're going to roll their deed die, but they're only going to get one mighty deed per round,
Yes.
even if they're rolling multiple dice. So I would take that as, if you have multiple action dice through spells or just being a higher level, and you're probably hitting that 3 on the die roll and getting that mighty deed to go off, I would take this as this gets you more opportunities. I mean, statistically, you're not going to get that 1 or 2, but I would say, hey, that first attack, oh, you actually did roll a 1 on your mighty D die. You have a second attack, you roll your D die again. Oh, you get a 5 on it this time because you're high level. I would allow the deed to still go off. You get more opportunities to make it successful, even if you don't get more deeds overall.
All right, so we're going to come back. We're not going to answer this question yet, because does a dwarf roll their D die for every new attack? We've determined that they roll one per action dice. And so at level 1, they have a D20 action dice. That action dice is split up, like Tyler said, to a regular attack and a shield bash, but it's still one action dice, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But you do roll a different dice for it, a D14 attack. Let's jump into the next question, Stefan, and then we'll come back to this one.
For sure. Yeah, question 3 is, what is that mighty deed of arms? If you're here, you probably know it, but we'll make sure you do.
Tyler, how do you tell a brand new player to the table what a mighty deed of arms is?
I tell them that this is their time to show off, especially with Xcrawl. It is your time to just make this your own, whether it be a signature move. If your character was a fast food worker beforehand, and you want to go after the knee because you once spilled some fry grease on your knee or something along those lines, you go for it. I've got a character that does something very similar, so and so it's a called shot. You tell me what you want to do, and no matter what it is, if you roll that 3 on there, we're gonna roll with it, and we're gonna make it happen.
Now, do you have a lot of dwarves in your games, or do you get a lot of experience with dwarves at all?
Not a ton. I've done several in some funnels, but nothing past level 1 as of yet. But the X crawl in its current form is still young, so there's plenty of time.
What's the favorite character that you find everybody wants to usually play? The favorite one or two classes?
Jammer. Oh goodness, Jammer. Everybody wants to play the Jammer. I've got 2 out of the 5 people at my table. 2 people are Jammers, and they're constantly thinking up ways to disrespect people, and they're battling back and forth as to who has the better takedown of people, who the better insults. So it's just a great time. And then the Lionize. I mean, what a great mechanic. And being able to bring people up and being thematic in each one of the events. They really go hard on Jammer.
All right. All right. Well, let's get into this question. Mighty Deed of Arms. Stefan, anything you want to add to a description of what a Mighty Deeds of Arms is?
Just kind of already said it, but that you need to get that 3 or higher on your deed die to pull the mighty deed off. But yeah, really, sky's the limit, or your imagination is really the limit of what kind of narrative flourish do you want to try to affect in the game.
All right. Well, let's look at handout 3A, if you would, please, Elena. Page 29, it tells us prior to their attack roll, a brawler can declare a Mighty Deed of Arms. Now, so we should do some clarification because under the Dwarf class, it says same Mighty Deed of Arms, see Brawler. So it sends you back to page 25. The deed is a dramatic combat maneuver within the scope of the current combat. Does that say if? Typo. We got to submit that. Of the current combat. It must be something possible for the brawler to do in their current circumstances with their current weapon and against their current opponent. So it has to be situationally relevant. Goes on to say in handout 3B that the deed does not increase damage, but can have other combat effects, pushing enemy back, tripping, disarming, temporarily blinding, and so on. And we'll look at those a little bit further in a second. And then handout 3C says the same die roll is used for the brawler's attack and damage modifier each round. This is the same die roll. So whatever D die you're rolling, that result that modifies your attack and damage also controls the effectiveness of your Mighty Deed of Arms. If the D die is 3 or higher, just like Stefan said, and the attack is successful, the deed succeeds. If the D die is 2 or less, or the overall attack fails, the deed fails as well. Is that right, Tyler?
Absolutely.
Anything to add about what we've read so far? Prior to their attack roll, a brawler can declare a Mighty Deed of Arms. Let's see, where can I exploit the language in this rule book here?
Always looking to play devil's advocate.
All right. It says prior to their attack roll, not prior to every attack roll. That's an important distinction. Handout 3D, if you would, please, Elena. On page 90, it talks about the D die. Now, this is where it's going to get a little sticky. A brawler, dwarf, or half-orc can declare a Mighty Deed of Arms, or a deed for short, prior to any attack. Does that mean... How are we relegated to 1 if we can declare it for before any attack?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's more of you could make it a part of your, if you got an axe and a shield, you could make it a part of your axe. You could make it part of your shield. The D die, your action, your special narrative flourish there. It can come from either source, any of sources that you create, but it can only come from one chosen of those any sources.
Important distinction. It says any attack, not every attack.
Mhm.
So if it said a brawler, dwarf, or half orc can declare a mighty deed of arms prior to every attack, then I think I would have a leg to stand up. But Stefan, I think you're correct. All right, let's get into the nitty gritty. Elaine, if you bring up handout 3E, page 90, rules for the declaring a deed. Tyler, does it have to be before or after the roll?
Always before.
What happens if it's after?
If it's a learning opportunity, the first time anybody's played a dwarf is the first time they've seen it. The first time, sure. I'll explain to them, okay, on future rolls, we're going to do this before. But after that, if you don't call it, you lose it. Hopefully you
Alright.
have a second action that you can call it for.
You still get your little just the attack modifier boost or damage modifier boost, but yeah, the narrative flourish.
No special circumstances. So, even if you I know some people have difficulty thinking about deeds, and they're like, I don't know what to do. Just trip every time, or just push back every time. That way, there's no attack back or something.
I want to disarm him. I want to disarm him again.
Yeah,
Just simple stuff like that. Tyler, what's the craziest deed you've ever seen in a game?
Oh goodness. We had some. There was a time when the room was spinning. The floor was spinning one way. The room was spinning. The walls were spinning the other. A creature was being lowered down from the ceiling, and they Nat 20 got a grappling hook on him, and then tried to then put that rope or chain into the spinning wall. The spinning wall had bladed objects on it. So it kind of pulled the character in along with the thing. So it ended up killing the boss eventually, but the character was wiped out pretty quickly too.
Nice. That's a good deed, though.
Oh, it was
All right.
great.
The next rule of calling out a deed: the deed must be within the reasonable ability of a crawler to perform, given the character's level and the enemy's size and power. So, if, for example, the example you just gave, what was the boss? Kind of humanoid size, or
Well, it was a golem. It was a pretty big.
pretty
Golem.
big, huh?
Yep.
Well, it wasn't at 20 though, huh?
It was, but the room, the walls having caught it, the mechanism of the wall, I said, was what helped to reel it in and into the wall. So it wasn't just the dwarf strength.
That is true. Mechanical strength is going to be much powerful. But within the character's level, the enemy's size and power, Stefan, your giants, they're going to take a pretty big D die to do something like that, right?
Yeah, you want to trip a giant. That's not going to be a 3.
What is a trippable giant number? 6, 7?
I feel like I'd start on a 5.
All right.
If I'm feeling kind, 4, but they're definitely getting a save.
As they should, a reflex save. All right, the third rule to declaring a deed is the deed succeeds at the most basic level if the attack hits and the D die is 3 or higher. Tyler, that means that you've got to, if I get a 19 on an attack, and I've got +3 on my D die for a 22, but the guy I'm trying to attack's armor AC is 24. Is that hit?
You got to spend some luck, buddy.
My deed was successful, but to empower that successful deed, you got to have a successful hit.
And I hope you said your deed is to destroy his armor and lower his AC.
Right?
And so the higher the deed die, the greater the deed. The judge may still allow the enemy a savings throw or require an opposed check of some kind, depending on circumstance, just like Stefan said. And so when I first understood the deed mechanic, I just, if it was 3 or above, it succeeded, whatever you wanted. And then as I refined my judging talents, I got into a little bit more like, oh, okay, 3 is this, 6 is this. Do you want to spend a point of luck? Or, a couple points of luck? Because you're always trying to get him to burn that luck.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Stefan is great at that, always trying to entice the luck usage.
I am. Last game I ran, I asked someone, I was like, "Oh, do you think that save is good enough?" He gave me 3 luck. The save was good enough. He didn't need to give me anything.
I
All
had
right.
Cynic at the table a couple weeks ago, very quick, and he helped me. He was like, "Oh, you could spend 10 luck to one of the players." He's like, "You know what? I will spend 10 luck," and all of our jaws hit the floor, and he it wasn't a one
Got
shot.
it done. All right. The last rule of deeds is that the deed does not interfere with a critical. So if it's 20 and the deed goes off, you still get the critical result, the automatic hit. And it may even enhance the crit if the player makes a good deed roll and a crit. So an important distinction there, because some crits have their own criteria and you know, for example, if you're trying to trip somebody and you get the crit that says you smack them in the head or something, they trip and smack their head on a rock or something to that effect. It's the judge has to work those things out. But let's take a look at what kind of mighty deeds of arms there are. And Lane, if you bring up handout 3F for us, pages 91 to 93, it says examples of types of mighty deeds of arms are blinding, sundering, pushbacks, defensive, grandstanding, trips, and throws. Now there's a couple from DCC RPG that didn't make it over. Disarming, I think it got kind of turned into sundering, but you've got disarming over there as well. And there was another one over there that I can't remember what it is. Tyler, what's your go-to? What's your go-to deed if you're playing a warrior, dwarf, a brawler? Blinding, sundering, pushbacks, defensive, grandstanding, trips or throws.
Thematically, I typically try to play over the top characters, so I'm always grandstanding. It may not be the best situationally, but it's a lot of fun.
Well, grandstanding it pays off in the long run. It gives you fame and gives you that build up while you're in there. All right. So we talked about what a mighty deeds of arm is. At the base, prior to an attack roll, a brawler can declare a mighty deed of arms, dramatic combat action. Now we have different attack rolls. So the reason I asked this question is, what if you have spell by proxy? Right? There's a familiar ability. I think there's a spell that does spell by proxy. So let's say Stefan gives me, the dwarf, a spell, and I'm casting the spell on that guy over there, but I've got a guy right here, Tyler. Do I get a shield bash with that one? Do I get a mighty deed of arms with that proxy by spell?
That's a great question. But it's not their, even though it's given to them, it's not technically their action.
They roll the d20 for the spell though?
Yeah, that's a good point. Man, I have never had anything like this come up. That's a great question. You know what? I think, why not? Let's go. It's Xcrawl. We're trying to raise ratings. Yeah, let absolutely.
Yeah, that sounds like good TV.
We gotta know what the rules are, though, Stefan. What rules is written? What do you think, Stefan?
That's fair.
Say the question again to me, because honestly, you said it, and my mind just went, huh?
All right. Well, so we talked about what Mighty Deeds of Arm is. Let's go over to question 4, and then we'll jump back to question 2.
Okay,
so
because the spell by proxy mighty deeds, it just.
Yeah.
All right, we'll come back to that one. So we'll come back to that one. Stefan, what's question 4?
Number 4, yeah. Do dwarves get a shield bash with each attack? So, hey, you get, at level 5, you get an extra action die. Do you also get an extra shield bash? What do you say? No.
Oh no. You get
No?
one shield bash it per round. Just like a deed.
All right. Let's check the rules to make sure. Elena, you bring up handout 4A. Page 53 says, when fighting with a shield, dwarf always gains a shield bash as a second attack. The shield bash uses a D14 hit instead of a D20. Tyler, is that D14 an extra action dice? Do you consider the D14 an action dice? It's an attack. We use action dice as attacks.
Man, I wouldn't think so. No, you still get the 1d20, and that's your base attack, and that gets added onto it. You can add your deed to either of those, and call it that way, but it's not another action because it's not specified as an action die to me.
And Elena, she's on top of it. I think D14 replaces D20 when it comes to Shield Bash. That is correct. But I think the D14 is the action dice, but it's part of the same action dice that the dwarf gets. It's split. Kind of like a bonus. Stefan, is that how you see it as well?
It is not technically an action dice. It is. I talked with Bob about this because I had some dwarves with shield bashes that I was coming up as a NPC stat block, and he was basically said, "Don't put it as an action dice. Put that in the special power section." That is not. I mean, you look at the dwarf PC, whether Xcrawl or DCC, they don't. It's not 1d20 plus 1d14 at first level. It's listed as a special class feature. So if they were paralyzed in a way, or some weird crit that says, "Oh, and you lose your next action," I wouldn't, or you lose an action dice, I would not be like, "Oh, well, you just lose your D20 or just lose your D14. You're not doing any actions. It's not its own action dice. It is a special power that you have. Functions rather similarly, but technically different."
I love that. So let's dig into that because that is a great explanation that it's a skill, it's an ability of the class, not necessarily action. Because when you look at the flow chart, the XP chart, it just says you have that D20 action. But it does say a dwarf always gains a shield bash as a second attack, meaning there would have to be a first attack to get the second attack.
No, I think you could do it in either order. I'm not going to be that picky if I'm running. You can shield bash and then do your axe. Technically, it does say that, but does that really matter too much? If my guy wants to do a pushback deed with his shield bash, which is probably not that's riskier because you got to hit with your attack as well. But if he wants to do it like that and then swing, sure, why not, buddy?
Now, Tyler, it doesn't say the order, but it says that you get it as a second attack. So rules is written. Me and Stefan have different opinions. What's your verdict? You're the judge.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to agree with Stefan. It's
always agrees with Stefan.
I know, right? I thought thematically I would just continue that along, but no. In all seriousness, I think that's a much more Bob's version is a much more eloquent way of saying what I was feeling. Is that your main action is your D20 die with your main handed weapon. Your shield bash is an additional special, if you will, though it is technically an attack.
All right. I'm going to have to disagree because it says you get it as a second attack. So even though you could do the shield bash first, you still need another attack to gain that ability. There's a triggering point. If you don't have an attack to build that trigger, then you can't have the trigger. But let's go over to handout 4B. If you would please, Elena. The dwarf adds their deed die to shield bash attacks and damage and can attempt mighty deeds of arms involving the shield. Now, here's where we have an important distinction that's not in, or I think it is in. Note that they can only attempt one deed per combat round. That is in the DCC RPG. Dwarves with multiple action die, level 5, still only receive one shield bash each round. So we have some very distinct rules here that say you only get one.
Yeah, I don't know if that clarity about only one shield bash per round is in DCC. I don't remember it. I mean, hey, I could be wrong.
Maybe it got added to the second printing. Let's see. The shield bash does 1d3 damage. Some dwarves customize your shield.
I know when I ran that level 10 game, you were a dwarf. I was letting you do so many shield bashes.
That's true. And you're right, it isn't in there. I could have swore I read it this afternoon. I checked on it, but you're right, it's not in
I'm gonna
there.
take this as a, that is how a high level dwarf is intended to be run. Same thing in DCC. There just wasn't the clarity within the rules, but they've added it in
Oh,
Xcrawl.
well, here it is. So it's the sentence at the very bottom of Sword and Board in DCC. Dwarves
Okay,
with multiple action dice still receive only one shield bash each round.
that's what I get for not
Uh,
opening the book when I run games. That's
that
not true.
might
I
be
opened the
in
book.
later printings. That might be in later
Maybe.
printings. It might have got added posthumously. But yeah, so that sentence is in there. Dwarves with multiple the parenthesis part that they only get one deed per combat round, that's not in there. So there's a clarification that we only get one deed per combat round.
Yep.
But now you only get one shield bash per combat round too. Tyler, is that how you see it?
Yeah, I have. I'm seeing the light, and I'll agree with you on that.
All right, now I'm going to hit you with some examples. Elena, if you bring up 4C, these are various pages, but I just put page 21 there. You get a shield bash with each attack, Tyler. What about a grapple attack? Do I still get a shield bash?
Are you really sword and boarding then? If you're grappling,
Well, not really sword and boarding, but grappling and boarding. So if I'm grabbing something, and then I slam my shield down on their foot, maybe to get a bonus on the mighty deed would be to get a D up maybe on the grapple check or something. Uh, I'm looking for a distinction here because there's different kinds of attacks, and if it says we get a shield bash with each attack per round. If we haven't used it yet, could we use it for these circumstances? Would you allow it during grappling checks?
as long as you're not holding a weapon in your main hand, let's go. Yeah.
Stefan, what do you think?
I think you would have to. I think just like I'm conceptualizing like grappling a guy and also hitting with a shield, and just logistically that seems very difficult.
Well,
I
yeah,
think unless you had like a buckler shield something, because you're usually actually holding the shield with your fist. It's not just hanging on your arm, and you're usually using your whole body, both hands, to grapple. I think something has got to give there. But you could, if your dwarf wants that to be, a go-to one of his things he does a lot, it sounds entirely reasonable to be like, okay, I want to get this like custom made shield, you know, get the right kind of branding on there, and then it'd be easy. So I think just haphazard, no, I wouldn't give it to you, but it just a little bit of prep work and sure thing.
All right, Tyler, what about a withdrawal attack? So I haven't used my shield bash yet this round. The bad guy's running away from me. I get a withdrawal attack. Can I also get a shield bash on that withdrawal attack?
Man. So that's a great question. My first inclination would be no. Um, but they do get that. I'd probably stick with no. Although it is per round. I guess it depends if they've had it done in the round. If that other individual's withdrawing and the dwarf hasn't yet gone. You know,
I
I could
haven't
see.
used it yet.
Yeah, then I could I could see an argument could be made to do it. But logistically, kind of like Stefan was just saying, how would you do that if somebody's running away to hit them with your shield? You kind of push them in the butt as they're moving along. Yeah.
Stefan,
But
what's your
well, I don't think
judgment
so. I
on?
did the quick Control F on withdraw, and it really, my opinion didn't change. You get a single free attack.
That is
It
correct.
could
But
so
as we've clarified, the shield bash isn't an attack. It's an ability that comes with an attack.
Yes. So I don't think you could. If you really wanted to, I'd say sure, use a D14 instead of a D20. If you really want to do that, I'll allow it.
No,
If
I want to get
you're
the
so set
D20
on
attack.
doing it.
I want to get the D20 axe attack and the extra D14.
No.
The D20 axe attack is my free single attack. And then
But you're
my
not.
ability kicks in to get a
I
free
don't.
second attack.
But this is a free attack. You're not really. I mean, yes, you're rolling a D20, but you're not using your action dice in kind of that
Ooh.
combat economy kind of mindset, So it's just a single free attack. You can use your shield if you want, but yeah.
All right, I'm gonna have to disagree because
Okay.
an attack, shield bash, you get it as a second attack. Tyler, you get the last word on that one. Yes or no?
I will say yes with a caveat as long as you haven't already used the shield bash this round. So.
All right, what about ranged attacks? Now, bow and arrow is going to be difficult with a shield, but crossbow, I'm thinking, fire a crossbow one-handed, still have a shield over here. Now, ranged attack, would you still, it's called sword and board, but could it be bolt and board? Would you allow that?
I mean, they'd have to be within melee range to do the bolt and board.
If they're melee, if they're range attack somebody over there, and then just shield bash this guy over here. Stefan, what do you think?
I'd allow it. Yeah, I'd be like, yeah, you can shoot the goblin over there and bash the goblin over here. Sure, I'd allow it. Also,
Tyler, would
bolt
you
and board. I like it.
You like bolt and board?
I like bolt and board a lot. Yeah, write that down. Yeah, it doesn't specify it has to be the same target, so yeah, why not?
All right, so now let's get into that spell attack. If by some chance this dwarf has learned how to cast a spell, or can use their action dice to proxy cast a spell, or somehow they're casting a spell, would they get a shield bash with that spell attack? Tyler, what do you think?
It would go back to my roasters and answer in regards to the withdrawal. You know what? If you haven't used it this round, then yes, you can feel free. Let's go.
Stefan, what do you think?
I would say it's very dependent on the type of spell. Because some spells have casting time of one action, and some spells have casting time of one round.
That's true.
So if you could, I would allow it for spells that have a casting time of one action.
And that's a great point that I didn't even think of until just this moment. Some spells aren't attack spells. So, and you only get the shield bash with an attack.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think most Xcrawl spells are one action because, they're spells for Xcrawl. They were, created really with, or refined with that in mind in many circumstances. But yeah, not all, though. But that's my caveat. Yes.
All right. So, final answers on does a dwarf get a shield bash with each attack? The dwarf doesn't get a shield bash with each attack they make. I'm going to say no. But they do get a shield bash as a second attack, meaning that a first attack triggers that. I would say that there's no clarification in the book that distinguishes what the first attack has to be, and it is their ability. It's their class ability. I agree with Bob on that. And so that triggering mechanism is the first attack, and whatever it is, if the circumstances allow, like, so they're in melee range with someone, and they have a shield on their arm, and their arm's not being used by whatever the first attack is, then yeah, shield bash away. Stefan, what's your final answer?
Not with each attack, but with each action die that they have. They can do a shield bash, but they only get one per round. So, hey, if you didn't want to use your shield, you're higher level, you have multiple action dice, you could kill Orc A with just your D20, and then use your second action die, whatever D thing it is, and then shield bash as well on that one. So, but you have to choose, and you're only getting it once.
All right, Tyler, you get the last word on this question. Uh, does a dwarf get a shield bash with each attack?
They get one per round. Just kind of echoing what's just been said. You get your attack, and you get a shield bash. If higher levels, you get a couple attacks, but you only get the one shield bash.
All right. So I think we're all in agreement. We've declared the shield bash as an ability. It is an attack. So let's go back to question 3. Does a dwarf roll their D die for every new attack? We've already got established that they can only get one shield bash per round. They can only have one deed per round. But they can use the deed die, the modifier, for every action dice. So, does the dwarf roll their D die for every new attack, for every action dice? Tyler, what do you think? Would they roll it anew?
Yeah. So for every action die, they would roll a D die. So yes, I think that they would get it. They would only be able to have one deed, but that modifier changes with each action that they have. So level 10, you're doing 2d20s and a d14. You're rolling your deed die 3 times, and that also gives you the opportunity of saving your shield bash for one of those other ones if you didn't succeed on the first, to get an extra 3 or 6 or 8, depending on how high the level is, to the shield bash. So yeah, I think that they would get one deed overall, but they would re-roll their deed die per action. Yeah.
I think it's very well explained. Stefan, what do you think?
Same exact thing. He explained it very well.
Very well. Yeah, so re-roll the D die and understand that it's a modifier that adjusts the attack and the damage. That gets re-rolled per action dice. So you can have, just like Tyler said, those multiple action dice. The shield bash not being part of a separate action dice, but being a ability of the one action dice that you can use one per round. It's kind of like a branch. I think we got that sorted. I think we did pretty good on that question. Like once you start talking about it, it's kind of confusing.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's a crunchier question, crunchier ability for sure. All right, we got a few more easier ones though to wrap
Let's
up.
hit the easy ones.
Yeah. Question 5. Infravision, speed, construction, detection, smelling gold, all those other things. Anything different from DCC, or are we dwarves essentially the same as far as that goes?
Seems to be mostly the same. The way that I read it and as I understand DCC, they're right up there.
I think exactly almost, except for one huge, massive, important distinction. Stefan, do you know what that is?
I do.
Hit
Armor
'em.
penalty and speed.
Yeah.
Armor penalty does not reduce base movement speed, which is a super common how just about everybody does that house rule for dwarves in DCC, but it's official now. There is one other tiny little detail that is different. The detail, it amounts to a single troy ounce or a gold coin. That then their underground skills section, that is the kind of in smaller concentrations dwarves may be able to smell a single gold coin. That's what DCC says. In Xcrawl, it says a single troy ounce.
Good point. Good point. And Elena, if you bring up handout 5A to support what Stefan is saying, armor does not reduce their base movement speed because dwarves should be wearing heavy armor, right, Tyler?
Oh, all the time.
So the -10 movement penalty, they're moving 10 feet. Everybody's always waiting for the dwarf tank. All right, so that's a very important distinction, and I love that it was added. Stefan, what's our next question?
Number 6, what's their mojo earning condition?
It's defeats of giants, and a couple other ones. It's not coming to me, but I know it's
ogres and trolls.
The bigger they are, the harder they fall. Yeah.
That's a good way to remember it. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. Tyler, in your games, Have you ever had ogres, giants, or troll?
Yeah, just fought a Cyclops giant this last weekend. They're doing Xcrawl Olympics.
All right. So you guys, if you get in Tyler's game, there's opportunity for dwarves there. Yeah.
Oh
Yep.
yeah,
And
always.
if you have a dwarf in your party, you might want to, even if you're running like the published adventures, maybe you should just make a little adjustment, give that dwarf the opportunity. You don't want to have a dwarf go through adventure after adventure, no ogres, giants, or trolls. You just reflavor something.
Now, Tyler, does size really matter? I mean, it does say ogre, giant, or trolls, but what if it's like a pygmy giant, like a
If
that
it's a
counts,
giant in
right?
there anywhere, we're all set. Yeah, the
Right?
world's
Giant
smallest giant.
giant eel. Like, does it mean giant as in humanoid or giant eel?
I say go for it. The opportunities for dwarves, like Stefan was saying, to gain mojo this way are sometimes few and far between in Xcrawl events. So absolutely.
Stefan, how do you feel about the addition of giant being just giant monster?
I don't think I would do giant eel. I mean, from the grouping it's in, that seems to be something that's like more trying to link to folklore and stuff. I
Sure.
do love the idea of pygmy giants, though. That could be a good kind of gimme.
All right, what's our last question for Tyler?
Uh, Last up, uh, does a if a dwarf has a negative luck modifier, do they got to choose a lucky weapon?
Tyler,
Yeah,
what say you?
I think so. Absolutely. You got to choose a lucky weapon. Whether or not you use said weapon, that's up to you. Uh, so, uh, but yeah, they got to choose it.
Stefan, what do you think?
I think they got to. In many other classes, it says something along the lines of may choose something when it talks about luck modifiers. It doesn't here. Um, we'll get Brandon on. Maybe that was an oversight. Maybe it was intentional. We shall see.
Let's look at the evidence. So, Elena, if you could bring up handout 7A, page 54, it says at first level, or a subsequent higher level if you're starting then, a dwarf chooses one specific kind of weapon to be their lucky weapon. The dwarf adds their luck modifier to all attack rolls with that specific weapon. The modifier remains fixed over time, even if the dwarf's luck score changes. To reflect the DCC RPG, if you bring up handout 7B, on page 53 in the DCC RPG, the dwarf's luck modifier applies to attack rolls with one specific kind of weapon, just as the warrior does. The kind of weapon must be chosen at first level. So the wording is changed a little bit, Tyler, from must be chosen
Mhm.
to chooses. Do you feel like there's any room for flexibility there?
No, you choose that. It says the dwarf chooses it. They choose it.
All right, I think I have to agree. And Stefan, as you were saying, let's go on to pan out 7C, Elena, if you would. In the DCC RPG, elves, with their long lifespan, elves have ample opportunity to practice their magic craft. At first level, an elf may choose to apply their luck modifier to spell checks on one spell they're choosing. And then handout 70, our last handout of the evening, page 59 for half elves in Xcrawl. A half elf may choose to apply their luck modifier to all savings throws. So, not necessarily a spell or a weapon, but the half elf and the elf get may choose. Now, in DCC, Tyler, it explains it because of their ample lifespan, their ample opportunity to practice magic craft. But I would argue, don't dwarves also have a long lifespan?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So wouldn't they also be able to choose weaponry? Why is weapon must be a choose?
Listen,
Well,
uh,
well,
in Xcrawl, you can always just go, man, every time you give Gimli a handgun, something terrible happens. And hey, that can be it. You can make it a really fun thing.
Tyler, what do you think?
I think thematically, going back to the very first question, and how dwarves have been treated by the North American Empire. In my mind, any dwarf that's going to be choosing to go into X crawl, are probably going to be younger. mainly because they haven't lived through the travesties that kind of happened, and the pulling out of the rug that happened to their elders. So I would think that they're going to be younger, and they've got to choose something. Maybe when they get a little older, they might choose something different. But I think thematically, they've got to do it.
And that's a good point. That experience level isn't there, so weapons are a little bit different, especially coming out of zero level. You have to choose that lucky weapon at first level. It's not You can't choose it later at like fifth level. I've got a question for you guys though. If the dwarf happened to have a negative luck modifier and they chose a weapon that is synonymous with their class, like a battle axe, a warhammer, an axe, would me as a dwarf and a negative luck modifier, Tyler, could I convince you that since it is my traditional homeland weapon of my race and my class, could I maybe erase that to a zero at least, not a benefit or a bane, but just a flat zero, and
Well,
that might be the lucky of it.
that could very well be, but to be able to get your luck to that, you've got to be able to earn it one way or another. Whether it be questing outside of a crawl, doing some deeds for a wizard, or something along those lines. You've got to get your luck modifier up there. It's not just going to happen because of your heritage.
What?
This says the modifier remains fixed over time, even if the dwarf's luck score changes. So this is
I'm
definitely a
asking
quest
for an
for it
exception.
situation.
I'm asking
Yeah.
for exceptions because I'm such a great talker. Like,
It's not about your personality modifier. It's about
all
your luck.
right,
Listen, I'll give you a +1 to attacks with folding chairs. Okay.
Right?
all right. So
Yeah, brother.
answer, Stefan. Final answer: does dwarf with a negative luck modifier have to choose a lucky weapon? Yes or no?
Yes, they do.
I agree. Yes, yeah. It sucks, but yes, you do. Tyler, final word.
Um, Xcrawl, man, if you haven't played it, you got to. And the dwarf is a phenomenal. The rendition in here is just phenomenal too, and I love the history. It's great.
All right. Do you allow your players to watch Raw over at Gone Forward? What 513 is that what it was?
It sure is. Yeah, absolutely. I post anytime I'm up here.
Encourage them because I'm always where me and Stefan are always dropping little bonus to maximize those classes. But thank you for coming on the show. Is there anything you want to share with us or anything you got going on?
I'm gonna be running some games at Origins and Gen Con. I've got a full slate of Gen Con running 6 games, so it'll be a great time.
And where's your GFA located at? Are you
Uh,
GFL?
yeah. So we're down here in Cincinnati. We every Sunday we're either running Dungeon Crawl Classics on or Xcrawl, and we do it opposite Sundays at
All right,
Capstone Games.
Cincinnati. If you're in the Cincinnati area, check it out. Stefan, you got anything going on?
Uh, Ordered some proof prints for the Conquest of Chaos, and waiting for those to get here in the mail. And I'm painting a lot of rooms.
Yeah. Good. I forgot to send out I was gonna send out a update last month before DungeonCon, and I thought I sent it out, but then realized I didn't. DungeonCon was crazy, so I'm gonna send it out soon for this month. And I've got Jeff Whitty, who was in chat just a minute ago. Great artist. He's doing a couple bonus pieces for me. Bonus pieces are
Nice.
they're getting finished
Awesome.
up. I will be at Gen Con. Stefan, I'll see you in a couple weeks at Chupacabra Con. Is that correct?
Not Chupa, North Texas. I'll see you at North
Yeah.
Texas RPG Con.
All right. If you are in the San Marcos, Texas area in 2 weeks, I think, stop by the Goodman Games booth at Chupacabra Con. Otherwise, we'll see you in. So, special date, next show, which would normally be on the 3rd. Instead of June 3rd, we are coming to you on Wednesday, June 4th, with Brendan LaSalle, who will be fresh back from the UK Game Expo. We'll find out how everything went over there with all of our friends across the sea and talk to Brendan and see what we got right and what we did. Thanks for joining us, everybody.